Are we live? I think we're live. I'm live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the program. Welcome to the show. This is Mark Vlogs Watches, and I am your host, Mark Goldberg. Thank you for joining me. Okay, fellas, so today we are going to talk briefly about a topic that is of keen interest to some of you, but not all of you. And it's probably the most irritating topic that I could humanly cover in relation to the topic of buying, selling, acquiring, collecting Rolex. And that topic is going to be the authorized dealer, the AD, the authorized dealer. Do you need them? Do you want them? How do you meet them? How do we establish the buying relationship? So, first, to those of you who are joining me live, welcome. And first fist, as always, goes to Val and Gray Moon. I'm going to be chit-chatting moderately with the Peanut Gallery. So if you tuned in later when this is not live and you would like to just skip over to the actual topic, just move yourself ahead a few minutes. Okay, guys. But I want to thank first TikTok, Thurston, Hal, William Rizzo, MV, and Mal Allah for being here, and all of the rest of you who are currently piling into the room. But now, into the topic. Oh, and those of you who are in the room will be providing me with questions and comments relating to the topic at hand and Rolex or watch collecting in general, what's happening in the market. So those of you who are watching this video on YouTube, not live, you will encounter all sorts of interesting things that may be evocative and interesting to you. Before we move any further, I think it's time to go ahead and do the quick fist watch check. And here she is. Today, fellas, I am wearing a watch that started a whole lot of controversy. I stirred up a lot of trouble with this watch. So this is the Tiffany blue, or turquoise as it is really properly known, Rolex OP41. Now, I gotta say, the Rolex Oyster Perpetual line, the entry level to the Rolex Sports line, is a line of watches that held zero interest for me up until this puppy was introduced, or I should say not this specific dial necessarily, but the proportions of this one, the OP41. Now, it wears bigger than one would assume. And that's why I think that Rolex calls it the 41, whereas in reality, it's actually 39 point something. There is almost no way to make this a 41. You put a calipers on this thing, and you can stretch your imagination and get this to come up at a 41 if you go from here to the crown, okay? But the normal way to measure a watch is from edge to edge, and it comes up at 39 point, something, 0.67, something like that. So it is a giant stretch of the imagination to call this an OP41. But Rolex and reality, they don't necessarily go together. Rolesaur, all these, what do they call their chromalite, which is their lume, all these, all the baloney, all the bullshit terminology that Rolex has invented, it's ridiculous. But, to be honest with you, it's my favorite brand and I love it. Look at the dial on this watch. But actually, before you get mesmerized by that turquoise, have a look at the proportions of this thing. I was literally never interested in this watch until Rolex, the perfect taper, 20 to, I think, 15, 16 maybe. Anyway, Rolex did a magnificent job with this watch in 2020 when they rolled out the proportions of what they call the OP41. And this is the thing, guys. Rolex as a brand, they kind of know what we want before we know. This looks crooked to me. There we go. Rolex as a brand, they tend to know what we want before we want it. And that's an important factoid to remember when we're discussing the brand. And it's not going to be until you see a watch over and over again on social media. About the worst thing you can do for your collecting habit is to join a Rolex group on Facebook. This YouTube channel of mine and others are not good for you. Okay, so I recommend that you quick hustle yourself out the exit, hit the end leave button right now, because I will just be feeding your adrenaline, not your serotonin. And so it's just, this stuff is not good for us. Instagram, not good for us. But if you're going to leave, please smash, lick, or smoosh the like button and do that now for me. Appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do that so we can do this again together. But here's the reality of it, guys. You see a watch like this when it first comes out and you think, I don't like it. Like, it doesn't even look like a Rolex. Is it even going to hold value? And then, by the time you see it for 6 months every day on Instagram, you think, damn, it's grown on me and now I like it. And then, of course, it's become unobtainable and you can't get one. Although, stick with me, boys. November of last year, I told you, go ahead and quick spend the $17,000, $18,000 to get you a turquoise OP41, which was what it was selling for at that time. And I got this one from David SW, because I had good reason to believe that it would be discontinued and its price would jump upward. This was one I couldn't get from the AD. Of course, the AD is the topic of conversation today. Why couldn't I get it from the AD on the one hand? And on the other hand, how did I know it was going to be discontinued? The AD. When I wanted to get one, when I finally realized I got a last chance to buy that watch, right? And I'm not going to get it from the AD. The reason that I couldn't get it from the AD was, although I had good relations with an AD, which we're going to talk about how to build that, right? Right shortly. Although I had those good relations, the issue was the AD was barely receiving any of these. Okay, so they didn't really have any of these to sell. That was the key point. And Rolex had written to not my usual AD, but one who I know. And Rolex had the Rolex AD, or actually Rolex USA, wrote to the AD and said, hey, the turquoise is going to be discontinued. You guys should not take orders for it. Now, that was unusual. They don't usually do it that way at all. That's the way it went down. And I believed my source. So I put out an information on this watch. I bought one, told you to do the same. Most of you laughed at me, but about a dozen guys ran out and bought one. And I have heard from every one of those guys thanking me. Now, Rolex prices, are they tanking or are they correcting? I guess it depends on your terminology. Certainly they're down. There's no ifs, ands, or buts that Rolex is prices are down in many cases 20%, and on the real hot, I don't know, the real hot, what do you want to call it, fad watches, and this is certainly one, they're down more than 20%. So this thing touched $50,000 until right now it seems to have settled in and around $30,000. Okay, but I paid $17,900, so I don't really care what happens to the price of it. As we are busy discussing what's happening to Rolex prices, there is one single truth that still holds true that has not changed, and I don't think is likely to change, and that is you can't go wrong if you buy at MSRP, manufacturer's suggested retail price, which, by the way, on the OP41 is right around $6,000. Somehow or another, I wound up with 3 of these things, and only one of them was I able to purchase at MSRP from an AD. I bought the bright blue version. That's actually bright blue. It's a misnomer, really, because it's a dark blue sunray, version of this. Same exact watch, different dial. And I bought that for $6,000, whatever its retail is, right around there. And I bought that retail from CD Peacock in Woodfield Mall, Schaumburg, Illinois. Ironically, the store that I bought my very first Rolex from. Although I more typically buy from James & Sons at their Orland Park location, even though they've got a few of them around the Chicago and Indiana area. Those are the fellows who sold me my Panda, so I'm extremely indebted and happy with James & Sons. But the thing is that almost nobody had OPs. It's for whatever reason, it's one of those sports watches that is in terribly short supply. Mind you, CD Peacock, it's kind of an interesting story. They've got multiple locations and they were having some problems with the Rolex line. So I think they'd started taking on customers that they might not otherwise have taken on. I was one of those. I managed to get the bright blue, the dark blue version of this. I'm grateful to have it. But the reality is it's very difficult to get anything popular out of an AD right now. It's difficult. And The reason for that is, although Rolex is shipping supply to the AD, you have to understand first, who is the AD? Is it just a Rolex boutique? Are there thousands of Rolex locations scattered around the United States and around the world? The answer is no. There is one Rolex, one and only, Rolex Geneva. They are a manufacturer. And although they may own a couple boutiques here and there throughout the world, for the most part, they depend on a large distribution network of independently owned jewelry companies, jewelers around the world to distribute their product. So Rolex will have a distribution contract with a jeweler in a particular city or location. And that jeweler, it may be family owned. They may own 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 locations, or maybe a corporately owned, such as Torno. I don't know how many locations Torno has, but probably 20 locations. And so these corporately held locations or these individually family-owned locations, they vary from large to small. They're in big markets like Las Vegas, New York, San Francisco, all the way down to little itty-bitty locations, such as the AD I visited in Albany, New York, a small family-run jewelry store where I spoke with the owner. By the way, what time is it? Well, Negroni time, except for I'm almost done. Albany, New York. Shout out to the Rolex in Albany. Here's the thing, though, fellas. When you're dealing with the AD, you are dealing with an independent company, essentially unrelated to Rolex, except for the distribution contract. And that's an important point. You're not dealing with Rolex. You are not a customer of Rolex. No watch buyer or watch collector is actually a customer of Rolex. You are a customer of the authorized dealer or the jewelry store, Joe's Jewelry Store, who may have a distribution contract with Rolex. And here's the problem. There are a couple of issues with the AD. First, let's talk about the good AD versus the bad AD so we can get that out the way. A bad AD realizes my Rolex shipment just came in for the month, and look, oh my gosh, I've got a Panda here and a bunch of lady Datejusts. Wow, cool. I could put them in the case, and of course, that Panda will sell in 10 seconds. In fact, I probably got 30 or 40 phone calls in the last week asking if I had a Panda, which I didn't. So I know I could sell that 30 times over. But these lady Datejusts, the 28 millimeter ones, they might sit there for a while. They're in two-tone with baguettes, and I don't get that many calls for them. I know. I'll call a jobber, which is basically a gray marketeer, and I'll tell him, hey, you can buy my Panda well over retail. So I'll make more than I would if I sell it to any one of those 50 guys who called me last week. But at the same time, I'm going to make you take like a half a dozen of those lady Datejusts. That's the bad AD. And guess what? If he does that, in 15 minutes, there's going to be a knock on the back door, out by the dumpsters, and there's going to be a transaction, So that's one way a bad AD acts. It's not the majority of ADs. Boy, I'll tell you what, there's enough of them to affect the collector. Then there's a different kind of bad AD, and the next kind of bad AD is the one who says, okay, you know what, I'm not going to do that, that backdoor deal, but I'm going to call one of these guys on my list of 50, and I'm going to start with, the oldest one and work my way through the newest. And I'm going to say, hey, I got a Panda. You might want to come in here and look at this beautiful $15,000 diamond pendant necklace, or this $50,000 diamond tennis bracelet that I've got. And that's not a lie. And my friend who bought the $60,000 diamond tennis bracelet for his wife, in order to get the $13,000 MSRP Panda, well, you know who you are, and undoubtedly you'll watch this video, right? So that's another way the bad AD goes. Look, guys, in my opinion, the AD that you want to try and formulate a relationship is the family-owned AD who owns 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 outlets, locations. Why? I feel like the family AD is more careful to abide by the regulations stipulated. All those, that Rolex distribution contract comes with a lot of provisions. And the Rolex line is going to be critically important to the family-owned AD, whereas the corporate-owned AD, maybe he's got Patek and all sorts of other lines, and they may be more inclined to play fast and loose with the rules. Now, that is not an indictment of any corporate-owned AD, certainly not Torno or any others, okay? That's not an indictment of them. I am merely saying, if you have the choice between dealing with a large corporation or a family-owned business, I like your chances better of acquiring Rolex through forming a relationship with a family-owned AD, because the owners, or people who know and deal with the owners on a constant basis, are opening that store in the morning and they are closing that store at night. But there is a thing or two that you have to remember. And one of those things is every Rolex AD is very, very aware of the fact that when they sell you a $6,000 watch, in this case, it doesn't matter what dial it has. Let's just take one of the uninteresting dials, like my dark blue one with the sunray. They're selling you, even right now, even at this moment when Rolex prices are well below their high from 6 or 7 months ago, they're still very aware of the fact that they're selling you a watch for $6,000. You could go out into the parking lot and sell it for 10 or 11 or maybe even 12. And depending on the dial, more. This one is discontinued. But you know what I'm saying. Essentially at this time, if the Rolex AD is selling you a watch, he's selling you something that you could resell for and make more of a profit than, or as much of a profit anyway, as he did. But here's the difference. He's got a bricks and mortar store. He's got payroll. He's got insurance. I mean, what it takes to run a jewelry store. Now, look, I'm not an apologist for the bad AD. So don't misunderstand me. The bad AD is not good for this industry in the same way that the flipper collector who is a carpetbagger, who doesn't love watches, who got into Rolex, only in the last couple of years and only as an investment, doesn't really love the watch, doesn't wear the watch, doesn't care about the watch, isn't interested in the watch. That guy is interested in one thing and one thing only. Is it worth money? How much money is it worth? Will I make money? Should I buy this model or that one to make money? As far as I'm concerned, I hope those guys lost their shorts in this decline. The rest of us, we see buying opportunities. I mean, gosh, if a Panda was for sale for $53,000 and now you can go get one for $30,000, even though I have one, as far as I'm concerned, that's a really good thing, guys. And that's another thing, I guess. I should probably handle it here right now. I'm sorry. You know what? I owe you all an apology. I got to eat it. I really do. I told you, only 4 or 5 months ago that the Rolex Panda was on a trajectory to hit $100,000 by the end of 2022. And clearly it's not. Okay. I get all kinds of comments and questions. Hey, you said blah, blah, blah. Are you going to admit? Yeah. I mean, it's obvious. I have to admit it. The trajectory it was on is not the trajectory it's on right now. Give it a couple of years, but we're going to get back. We'll get back. If we never get back, I'll be extremely surprised. Okay. Just don't sell Rolex. I see some of you in the comments like William Rizzo. Go ahead and let's quote Blue Shirt Buddha right now. Never sell Rolex. Never sell Rolex. Never sell Rolex. And the reason is eventually you'll be sorry and you'll find it harder to get. Okay. DAD. Now, first of all, here's where I'm going to lose a bunch of you. So the guys that are with me right now, please do me a favor and hit the like button. And I'll tell you why, because I'm about to give you some information that's going to piss off a lot of people. It's going to be upsetting. And that is, you have to kiss a little butt. Now, I don't mean in an insincere way. If you're the kind of guy who, I got 10 grand and I want to spend it and I don't care who thinks what, well then, you know what, Rolex is, if you want it, you better go buy it on the gray market or from a collector who already owns it. And there are plenty of those guys. You can look at Chrono, you can look at eBay. It's another whole concept. You got to be really careful on eBay. Know what you're doing. But nonetheless, there are plenty of decent sellers of Rolex on eBay. But I don't want, generally speaking, I don't want to acquire Rolex that way. I bought this from a trusted source, David S.W. I felt like I knew I was getting a proper box and paper set, and if there was something wrong with it, I knew he would stand behind it. Good people to deal with. But by and large, I want to buy from the AD. It's just difficult. Here's why. For every person asking for a watch from the AD, for every guy who gets a watch at the AD, there's 100 guys who don't. There are too many of us, and it's not that there are too few ADs, it's that there are too few watches at the AD. You know, this whole concept, guys, of exhibition watches, meaning watches that you can try on at the AD, but which are not for sale. That is not the AD's idea. That was entirely the idea of Rolex, because Rolex got tired. They thought it was bad for their image for all of the ADs around the world to have utterly empty cases. So it just looked like Rolex was a bunch of fools. And one thing the Swiss do not want to do is come off as foolish. So they began eventually to ship exhibition only watches. And those are fully functional watches, movements. They have movements in them. They're perfectly good watches. And what happens is they're there for the punters to try on. But eventually, the rep will tell the store, okay, you know that blue Sky Dweller that you have on exhibition, you can sell that now. And they'll let them know when they can go ahead and sell that. So everything that's on exhibition at the AD eventually will get sold. But here's the thing. There's going to be 100, 200, 300 guys asking for every one of those watches. The hardest watch to buy from the AD, it's not that it's a Panda. It's not that it's a Sky Dweller. It's not that it's the hardest watch to buy from the AD is not any specific Rolex model. The hardest watch to buy from the AD is the first one. And here's why. Because the AD doesn't know you. And they have a lot of people who they do know, who they have good reason to believe, if I sell this guy a watch who I have sold to before, he is highly unlikely to flip that watch. And that's of critical importance to the AD. You have to understand the average AD is very, very concerned not to lose the Rolex contract. And one of the quick and easy ways to ruin their relationship with Rolex, which they find profitable, but one of the quickest ways to ruin that relationship is to sell to guys who flip, who throw those watches around, and then eventually, somehow or another, those serial numbers get back to Rolex and the rep, and it just gives a bad taste for the Rolex rep to that AD. So the bad ADs don't worry about it, honestly. They just don't worry about it. They feel like they have enough power to get by. But, you know, hey, a couple of years ago, Rolex cleaned house and got rid of like 200 ADs in this country. So I think the guys who really depend on Rolex as an important part of their profit picture, they're very careful to not upset Rolex. And that's understandable. You would do it too. I mean, how often do you go into your job and just piss off your boss? I mean, that's the one thing that you don't want to do. You know, and listen, I want you to have, if not sympathy and compassion for the AD, because I know a lot of you have none. I want you to have understanding, because information is power and information is your friend. The AD signs a contract with Rolex, and the AD basically guarantees Rolex that they will have premium space. And what that means is the square footage dedicated to Rolex will be X, and Rolex controls that. It's going to be a lot of the store will be dedicated to Rolex. It will be the front of the store. And the real estate will be premium. Okay. You don't find Rolex next to 7-Eleven. You know, you don't find Rolex next to the dollar store. And there's a reason for that. It's not an accidental reason. It's because Rolex chooses ADs who have premium space, luxury rental in super upscale areas of certain cities. And then if the nature of that real estate begins to shift and change, Rolex will tell them, dude, you got to move. You got to move. We'll give you time, but you got to move. And so you can't believe the amount of power that Rolex has over the AD, but it's a good relationship in the sense that if the AD follows the rules, they are very likely to have a successful jewelry business. So it's kind of like a symbiotic relationship in that way. But at the end of the day, how concerned would you be for any individual customer if for every piece of product you had, there were 100 guys begging for it? You would just pick the best of the best, you know? For example, I do that. I'm a dog trainer, as you all know. Mark Goldberg, world's greatest dog trainer. Let Dogs Be Dogs, The Art of Training Your Dog, available in bookstores near you. And in fact, even worldwide, globally, you can get it electronically. And then I'm working on a new book right now. But because of all that, there is some moderate call for my services. And listen, you know, when people call me, they want to train their dog. I get a guy calling me up and he goes, hey, how much it's going to cost to train my dog? And let me tell you, this is what I expect you to do for the money. I'm putting that guy to the back of my list. The person who calls up and they're polite and they're interested and like, I love this dog, but I got a problem. That's the person that I want to book. So I'm a little selective with my clientele, you know, and so is Rolex. So are Rolex ADs, and as they should be. So guys, when you think about contacting the Rolex AD, understand there's a little bit of romancing involved here. I mean, what did you do? Walk up to your wife and go, hey, you're kind of cute. I think I'm just going to take you and you're going to marry me. We're going to pump out kids. And that's the way it's going to be. All right, sweetheart, that's how it's going to go. No, you romanced her, or I assume you did, or I sure hope you did for your sake. Otherwise, she knows where you sleep and she knows where all the kitchen knives are. Remember something. This is a little bit about forming relationships, okay? So first thing is you cannot form a relationship on the phone. Don't be calling the AD. And I'm going to tell you why. Because anytime I'm in an AD, the phone is like nonstop ringing. And I hear them over and over again. No, sir, I'm so sorry. We don't have a James Cameron. They're unbelievably polite. Okay, they can't be, they can't be nasty. They can't be vicious. They can't be violent. But at the end of the day, if you go and you spend any length of time in a Rolex, you're going to hear that phone ring constantly. No, sir, I'm very sorry. We don't have a Submariner with a green bezel at this point. No, sir, I'm sorry. Come on in. We'll be happy to show you what we have. And we have watches for exhibition. You can try them on. Don't call them. It's just such a bother. Don't email them. Go to the store. If you are not local enough to go to the store, then you need to find one where you are local enough, because the fact that you are local to them is meaningful. Most of the ADs will prefer to sell into their local market for a couple reasons. One of them is their Rolex rep has informally indicated to them that Rolex would like it if you sell in your territory. Now, in the United States, we have restraint of trade laws. So it is illegal for Rolex to say, don't sell outside your territory or we're going to cut you off. They don't say that. What they just say is, we would like it if, wink, wink, we would like it. Okay, so the ADs would rather sell to people who are like local to them. That's the first thing. Secondly, don't go in there looking like a total schlub. No, you don't need to wear a tuxedo. Just find somebody, talk to them, indicate your sincere interest, express the fact you realize that this may be an uphill battle, but you're in it for the long haul. And excuse me, guys. And you'd really like to purchase a Rolex, and I'd really like to buy it from you, because I'm in the neighborhood where we live in the same city. I love watches. I love Rolex above all. And this is something that is a life stream for me. And if you have any story, like I really wanted to commemorate the birth of my daughter, whatever it is, I know to some of you, this is going to sound like complete bullshit and it's going to be irritating. And I'm going to get a bunch of comments, I'd rather die than, okay, fine. This is not for you. I understand that. But let me tell you what also happens every time I make a video like this in the comments. I get a bunch of guys saying, you're not going to believe this, but I told them that I was commemorating the birth of my daughter or an anniversary. And 3 weeks later, I got a Starbucks. James and Sons, if you're watching this, I want a Starbucks. I'm not birthing no more babies at this point, guys. But Brian, if you can help me out, please do. James or John or Jimmy, help. Anyway, every day somebody opens their chocolate bar and finds the golden ticket. So what I'm saying is you never know. Yeah, there are a lot of people who have spent 3 years on the waiting list. I mean, if you've been on a wait list for 3 years and you never bought a watch from this AD before, then you're not on a wait list, and you shouldn't think you are. And that's kind of the wrap up that I'm going to have before I look at comments, because I got a lot of comments and questions here. So we'll run through those in a couple moments. But the wait list. The wait list, whether there is a wait list, whether it's a real thing, whether you're really on the wait list, is going to depend entirely on the AD. The AD who says you're on a wait list, but you never bought from them before, 70-30, it's baloney, okay? The guy who says you're on a wait list, but you've purchased watches from him before, the odds are reversed. So just understand, for every Steel Sports Rolex or every hot model, like the root beer, that you want, there's hundreds of guys that call them every day, dozens of guys who email them every day. And then there's a good handful that stop in every week. You want to be in that group. All right. Okay. Let me look through these comments and see if I can find stuff that we want to talk about. Your questions, we'll throw them up now, and then we will bail out of this. Mal Law asks for my thoughts on the new Air King. Look, I like the Air King. I think it's cool. I like the new one. I like the loom. I like Arabics. In general, I like Arabics. But it's not a watch for me. And the reason is, for me, I get very confused by that speedometer look. There are numbers on there that don't belong on there. So I think it's a good watch. And if it speaks to you, that's great. But I don't believe that there is any single Rolex that is just like perfect. And if my AD called me and said, hey, we got an Air King in, I would thank them so much for the call, and I would pass, and I would tell them, like, here's what I want instead. How about a Starbucks? Or how about a left hand? Oh my gosh, guys, I want that left-handed GMT. I think that's cool. There's William Rizzo, who said he's gotten 2 this year. That happens. So cool. But I mean, basically, you just have to stay in the game. If you don't buy the lottery ticket, you're certainly not going to win. Ticking Time says, I got him back into watches. My apologies. I'm really sorry, that I did that. It probably wasn't a very nice thing to do. My AD's store sign needed replacing. It turns out it's coming from Rolex Switzerland. Yeah, that's another point. The fixtures, the signage, everything that the Rolex AD has, they have purchased through Rolex. Now, it's probably not coming all the way from Switzerland. There is a company called Rolex USA, which is Rolex Switzerland's subsidiary here in the US. And by the way, would you like to know who the chief financial officer of Rolex USA is? Mark Goldberg. Mark Goldberg is the CFO, the chief financial officer of Rolex USA. So sad it's not me. It's a different Mark Goldberg. My name is Mark Goldberg with a C, and he is Mark Goldberg with a K. But damn, I wish he was my cousin. By the way, if you'd like to write to me, markgoldberg8@gmail.com. Throw a like quickly on this. We've got some more comments to discuss, but I will appreciate your like on this because they are hard to get. And also, if you are watching this and seeing me for the first time, please subscribe so we can do this again together. Okay. Tamir Fell says to me, the king of OPs is the White 39. And that's there are plenty of people who agree with you, Tamir. I do not. I find the dial somewhat smaller, so it is a smaller proportioned watch, if you will. And you got to remember, I have a big, beautiful, sexy 7 1/4 inch wrist, and the thing, both of them actually, and the thing that really is remarkable about my wrist is it's flat. So that gives me a lot of surface area to display a watch. But if you've got smaller or rounder wrists, then that OP39 is definitely going to be better, because this 41 and all that big open wide dial is going to look excessive. Okie dokie. Question, you recommended to pounce on the Hulk during the COVID-19 panic, which was genius. What are your thoughts on buying a Hulk during this dip? Man, guys, I told you people to buy a Hulk when they were $12,000 and $13,000. And most of you laughed at me. And now, even after the dip or the crash or whatever you want to call it, the Hulk is at 25. Now, mind you, granted, that's down from like 30. But it seems to be holding nicely at 25. So I don't think you can go wrong with a Hulk. I have 3 Submariners, full gold, all of them 40 millimeters, full gold, normal black, and then that Hulk. By far, my favorite one is the Hulk. James and Sons sold me that watch at MSRP, having formed a relationship with them. So I paid like $9,050 or something like that for my Hulk. I'm very, very happy with it. And guys, here's the trick to forming a relationship. Part of it with an AD is just never sell the damn things. I purchased my first Rolex from an AD in about 1987. It's a 34 millimeter two-tone date on a Jubilee, and I still have it. I have never sold a watch that I bought from the AD. So what do I think about buying it? Buy it. It's a fabulous watch. It's the most interesting sub I've ever owned. I mean, the gold, the full gold with the lunette bleu and that brilliant blue dial is also an incredible watch. But the problem is, if there's a problem, is this gold. It's like freaking gold. It's like it's a magnet for eyeballs. And therefore, I think it's a bit more dangerous to wear out and about. Which Daytona would be the hardest to get from an AD? Panda Platinum or Yellow Gold Paul Newman Oyster Flex? Well, first, there is no easy to get Daytona. They're all terribly hard. Probably the easiest of all to get would be the two-tone, but even those are not easy. But I think the one that's really the absolute hardest to get is not even on this list, and that would be the Rainbow. I mean, I think they make probably 20 rainbows a year. You know, they're like 200 grand, I think, on the secondary market. So the Rainbow would be the hardest to get. And then after that, the one that I think that I just think is a marvelous watch is the Meteorite. If you are ever offered the opportunity, guys, to buy any Meteorite dial Rolex, period, do it. As the rancher said, it's not like they fall out of the sky, but they kind of do. So the Meteorite, I think, would be the absolute toughest one to get out there. Mark, best Rolex to wear while riding a golf cart. Well, you know, heck, I think you could wear a Submariner. You can wear any Rolex wearing a golf cart. I mean, I probably wouldn't wear a Cellini, but I think almost any of them. I mean, remember something, even probably the President. You know, if you're playing at a top club, you probably want to wear the day date. There you go. There's your answer. And William Rizzo, it took 9 months to get my wife's date just 31 pink dial. Well, that's a long time to wait for a lady's watch, but you know, 9 months, you got one. Nice. And not only that, that counts for your buying history. I mean, buying history isn't like some mathematical formula, but like your AD knows you. So I think that's a good thing. The ADs these days prefer to sell to people who they know because it feels safer to them. You know, that's the deal. Mark, where do you think the OP Coral lands price-wise? I want it badly, but not $16K for a $5K retail price for a three-hand Rolex. Well, first off, if you're talking about the Coral in 41, it's not $5K, it's like $6. But I hear you, I understand you, I feel you on this one, my brother. So here's the thing. I didn't want to pay triple, quadruple retail for this one. I didn't. But until I realized, like, I had no choice if I wanted the watch. In other words, I was going to buy it for almost 3.5 times retail, or I wasn't going to buy it at all. And honestly, I really, really like that Coral OP41. I mean, it's the same watch, but the thing is I own 3 of them already. And it kills me a little bit to pay that, you know, 14, 15, 16, 17, probably not even 14 for the Coral. Because it's just too many OPs. How many can I have? But you want to know what? Buy it. If you have the money, buy it. I don't think you'll get hurt, provided you wanted to hold it and enjoy it and wear it for a really long time. It's a beautiful color. And so I don't think you can get hurt. On the other hand, I feel like if you wait and you look at this again in 2 years, it's going to be 25 or more, especially when they discontinue it, and then you'll be unable to acquire it at all. So he's talking about the 41. Yeah. If I were you, I would take advantage of what this dip represents, which is a buying opportunity. Never sell Rolex. I agree with you, William Rizzo, and absolutely. Donald does not like any of the brightly colored OPs except for this turquoise. Well, you know, the funny thing is that is not a popular opinion. I mean, I pretty much kind of all of them have grown on me, except for I don't like the PP yellow. You know, that one is not my favorite. But I really like all of the rest of them. But I would say among, you know, the average Joe, this is one of the least favorite ones. They say it looks feminine or girly. I myself am confident in my masculinity. But, you know, for those of you who are not, okay, fine, then, you know, get yourself a boring black dial one. But what can I say? Guys, we are here at the 40-minute mark. There are a lot of comments that I didn't get to. My apologies, but I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna pronounce time of death, you know, in just a moment here now. We will do more of these live streams because I'm writing a new book. This is my previous book, my last book. You can get this anywhere. If you'd like to support this channel, go ahead and buy a copy of the book, The Art of Training Your Dog, from me and the monks of New Skeet. But I want you to slow down, back the truck up, think about taking the time to form a relationship with your AD. The hardest watch to buy, the hardest Rolex to buy is the first one. They get easier after that, but you've got to invest, you know, the time to romance the AD a little bit, and it's worth it. It's not that you're supposed to be insincere. It's not that you're supposed to kiss ass. You're supposed to understand they have problems too. And picking out the right guy to sell a watch to when there are thousands of people asking for the same watch, that's a problem. So you should be a little bit more understanding. Thank you for joining me. Throw a like on this video. That part I will really appreciate. And subscribe to this channel so we can do it again. I know about Rolex. You know about Rolex. Let's do this Rolex thing together. Remember, paint the sky your favorite color. Let's do this again soon. It's Goldberg. Peace out.